welcome to our webinar on one-page profiles with staff. Today we're going to be covering three things. The first is 3 reasons why one-page profiles could be a powerful thing to do across the whole of the organisation. I'm going to share 4 different ways that we're seeing different organisations use one-page profiles, and also the 7 common mistakes that we're seeing and how to avoid them. But I want to start off with a question. Can you deliver personalisation without being person-centred with staff? Now, it won't surprise you to hear that I don't think so, because I think we need to have a person-centred culture in order to deliver personalisation. We can't have a person-centred culture unless we're being person-centred with staff. You can't be person-centred with staff unless you know what matters to them and how to support each staff member well. And equally, it's not enough just to know this, but we need to be acting on it as well. I think that one-page profiles are the foundation to this, and obviously that's the subject of our webinar today. So here's my one-page profile, and I know that a lot of you will be familiar with one-page profiles, and you can also see the 3 different sections. So the first section is an appreciation section, and you might see it called different things like what people like about me or what great things about me, but it's all about appreciation, where we recognise and appreciate somebody's gift. The second section is what's important to me. This captures really what makes people tick. And as you can see from my one-page profile, you see the people who are important in my life, both at home and at work, and some of the things that make me who I am and that I feel really important in my life and passionate about. And finally, it's how to support me, and I've specifically focused on how to support me at work. Yesterday, I was reminded about how powerful having one-page profiles are. I'm starting to work with somebody called Sarah, and we don't know each other very well, and it was only the second meeting that we'd had, just the 2 of us. Halfway through the conversation, she said, I've had a look at your one-page profile, and is it true you're a black belt in karate? And that enabled us to have a very different kind of conversation than the ones we would typically have. When I got home after my meeting, I went through my emails, and there was an email from a company who wanted me to help them find a new trustee for a charity. And the person who was emailing me started the email with, I read your one-page profile, and I thought I'd email you rather than playing telephone tag so we can set up a call that works for both of us. So just, very naturally in my day-to-day work, I'm seeing how one-page profiles can make a difference in how I work, and it certainly makes a difference in how my team works together. So I want to share with you what I think are the 3 critical reasons why we want to explore having one-page profiles in an organisation. And here is the first. I think having one-page profiles are fundamental to creating a person-centred culture, because what it's about is modelling what we expect from staff. We want staff to value the gifts and skills of the people they're supporting. We want staff to really know what matters to everybody they support, and also to support people in the way that makes sense to them. You may have seen something like this. We call it a one-page strategy, and it's a way of looking at what success means in an organisation from an individual's perspective, from the staff's perspective, and from the organisation's perspective. And if you look at the middle box under what success means to staff, it says that I'm listened to and feel valued. And if you look underneath that, it says we deliver success by staff having one-page profiles. Well, by staff having one-page profiles, it means that they're both listened to because they're paying attention to what matters to them and how to support them, and they will certainly feel valued if that's put into action by their manager. Another thing you may be familiar with is the progress providers checklists. These are our simple checklists for managers to see how well they're doing and check their progress in using person-centered approaches and practices in their work. And one-page profiles, not surprisingly, are featured quite heavily in this. I know 3 or 4 national organisations who've been using progress providers, and as a result of that have started to introduce one-page profiles, both for staff and most importantly for the people they support as well. So a second reason why having one-page profiles for staff can be a good idea is it's the really strong way that we can deliver personalised support to staff. The National Disability Charity United Response managed to reduce turnover by 40% through systematically introducing person-centred practices throughout the organisation. Part of this was really knowing how to support staff as individuals. You might be familiar with the well-known saying that's sometimes called the golden rule that says, treat people as you'd like to be treated. Well, not in a person-centered organization. In a person-centered organization, we're striving to treat people as they want to be treated in terms of what matters to them and how they want to be supported. I think this works for managers as well. This is Howard's one-page profile, and if you wandered down to Norris Bank School in Stockport and went into the staff room, you'd see it on the wall there alongside the one-page profile of his deputy, Tabitha. When I saw him last week, he told me a story about how he's been using his one-page profile with staff and how now all the staff, as well as the children, have a one-page profile. You might notice that at the bottom of his one-page profile under the How Best to Support Me section, it says, please give me feedback on how I deal with challenging situations as I may still be wobbly and need reassurance. He said that he got an email from one of his staff members, one of the teachers, in response to a session they'd had together with a family that had been quite difficult and Howard had found quite hard to deal with. He said he got a lovely email from the staff member who said that because they'd read Howard's one-page profile, he then decided to give him some direct and positive feedback about how well he'd handled that situation. So Howard, as a head teacher, was telling me what a difference it's made to him and his relationships with his staff team and how he's being supported through having a one-page profile. So the third powerful reason is that we get the best match, matching people to people, i.e. staff to people supported, matching staff to roles wherever they are in the organisation, and staff to task responsibilities as well. Because a one-page profile involves bringing the whole person to work. By knowing all about somebody, we can do a much better job of matching people within the organisation. I think that is the opportunity to have a big win-win. So from a staff perspective, they stand a better chance of having their talents used in their work and even sharing their passions and interests. It's a win-win for managers because it means we get the chance to deploy staff in a way that matches their talents and interests to people supported as well. For people supported in an organisation, I think the quality of people's life depends mostly on the quality of their relationship with the person who's supporting them. And I think people are safest when supported by people who both like them and understand them. Let me introduce you to Ken. Ken lives in a residential home, a care home where 43 other people with dementia live as well. One of the things that we're working with this care home to do is to introduce individual service funds. And as part of that process, every individual like Ken and every staff member has a one-page profile as well. What we're asking people is what is it, as well as developing their own one-page profile, is there something that they'd really like to do or try over the next month? Ken used to be a footballer, and one of the football teams that he played for is Stockport County, who are in the photograph there. Ken said that one of the things he really wanted to do was to go to Stockport County matches. So rather than just matching Ken with his key worker, who may or may not like football and may or may not be able to support Ken well in that situation, the manager, Lisa, looked at the one-page profiles for staff and found a one-page profile of somebody who also loved football. That person was Roy, who's the housekeeper for Bruce Lodge. So Roy and Ken have been going to see Stockport County on a regular basis as well. But if you talk to Lisa, Lisa would tell you about the knock-on effect that using this approach of matching staff and individuals according to shared interests has had on the whole of the staff team. She said, it's like the old advert, I saw this and thought of you. Because one of the things that Roy did, Roy's also connected to John, is that John really loves classical music. So in his own time, Roy looked through his collection of DVDs, found a couple of CDs that are on classical music by Mozart, and then next time he was on shift, made sure that John was supported in a quiet area where he could listen to this music. And Lisa's got lots and lots of examples of staff really going the extra mile and sharing their interests and hobbies with the people that they're supporting. So those are the three reasons why I think organisations can really benefit for having one-page profiles for staff. And here are the 4 ways that we're seeing them being used. Now the first one is arguably the most obvious one, as an introduction to the person. One national provider that I went to visit a few months ago, I went and sat in reception while I was waiting for my meeting time. And there was a folder on the desk in reception that said, meet the team. And if you opened the folder, it had the one-page profiles of all the admin staff who were in the office so that you could meet them and learn a bit more about them. When it was time for the meeting, I was showed upstairs to the offices, and I looked round, and on the walls of the offices were the framed one-page profiles of all the senior management team so that you could immediately see who people were and what mattered about them. And they looked beautiful. They were really nicely illustrated with photographs as well. Another national provider, if you see an email from any of the senior management team and other folk in the provider, you'll see at the bottom the email signature, my one-page profile, and you can click on that and it goes straight to the one-page profile for that individual. The same national provider has their one-page profiles on the website, so not only do you get to meet the person in terms of their job role, you can then find out a bit more about them as individuals too. So it's great to have that, but here's a good example of a provider using it in the day-to-day running of the organisation. With one national provider, I'm part of an implementation group for individual service funds, which they're looking at rolling out across the whole of the organisation. At the first meeting of this task group, we were sent an agenda asking us to bring our one-page profiles along with us. A few minutes into the meeting, after we'd done our opening round, the chair asked everybody to go round and share one thing from their one-page profile that was important to them, so we could learn a bit more about each other, and also one thing from the support section about what support they needed to get the most out of them and to be able to contribute the most on the task group. So a really great way of using one-page profiles in the day-to-day running of the organisation. Some of you might have had professional training as a nurse or a social worker or a therapist, or even done a course in neuralistic programming. And you'll understand the importance that these courses give to something called building rapport, of really connecting with somebody and developing a quick and good relationship with them. I think one-page profiles gives us a head start in doing that, as I explained in my relationship with Sarah, because she knew something about me and immediately we could talk about something that she wanted to find out a bit more about or that we had in common. This is my mum. She's in hospital, and last April she had a car accident, which meant that she needed to spend several weeks in hospital. If you speak to her, she'd said that she really didn't feel like she was treated like a person at all. She was the fractured hip in the bed over there. And she really struggled, and the nurses struggled as well, to find and connect with Mum and develop rapport with her. This week I went to another hospital. This is one near Blackpool. And as you come into reception, you'll see these mini profiles about the nursing staff and the reception staff on the wall. As I came into the hospital, I met Jen, and this is Jen in the photo. I was there to meet and spend time with Tracy, and Tracy and Jen were having a conversation about gardening, because Jen said she just read on Tracy's profile that Tracy had a greenhouse and enjoyed pottering in it, and Jen was just asking Tracy about her top tips in gardening. And Tracy told me afterwards that wasn't a typical conversation that her and Jen would have had. It was just through having the profiles on the wall, staff are finding different ways to connect with each other. The same day, Kath, who was on reception, told me a story about Linda and Jan. Jan's one of the patients at the hospital who I went to meet the same day. And Jan and his wife had looked at all the one-page profiles, both in reception and along the corridor where the profiles of the nursing staff are as well. Later on, he came back to reception and asked Kath who Linda was, because he'd read on Linda's one-page profile that she enjoyed cruising. Jan's a really, really keen cruiser, and he went to find Linda, and they had a great conversation about cruises, comparing notes on the cruise liners that they've been on as well. And again, a really different way for the patient to have a conversation with staff and engage with them differently. If you went down to Oxley Park School in Milton Keynes and you went into reception, you'd find this display. It's a display of the one-page profiles of the staff there. So again, parents have the opportunity to learn about the teachers who are teaching their children in a very different way. The second way that one-page profiles are being used in organisations is around recruitment and matching. a national organisation, if you wanted to have a job with this organisation and applied to work with them, one of the things they'd ask you to do is to bring your one-page profile to the interview. They would send you details about why this organisation is focused on one-page profiles, what the headings are, and top tips for completing the headings. When you take your one-page profile into the interview, they'll ask you some questions about it and also look at the one-page profile to see how you've completed it. The HR director says it's a great way of finding out how people follow simple instructions, and it means they can ask questions directly about that individual and ask them how they would be bringing their interests and gifts to the workplace as well. Here's another example about what person-centred home care can look like and how matching staff can be important in that as well. Leonora lives in Blackpool and she's interested in having home care and particularly person-centred home care. What the manager does when he meets the person for the first time is to develop a one-page profile for her, and in this case Leonora. Then the manager looks at the one-page profiles of the staff in the local geographical area and see who has a good match for Leonora's hobbies and interests, who has the characteristics that best fit with Leonora, and who has the skills needed to deliver and develop the support that Leonora needs. And the people then that get selected from the one-page profile becomes Leonora's team. So Leonora gets the right people through the door who are a good match to her. The third way that I've seen organisations use one-page profiles is in performance management and then linking that to working together for change. So we're seeing lots of organisations start to use one-page profiles in supervision. And here, again, back at Oxley Park School, this is the principal, Kathy Higgins, and she started using one-page profiles within her performance management sessions with the teachers. So what she does, and she did this with Melissa, is just has a general conversation going through what's important to Melissa and how best to support her, and talking about what's working for Melissa and what's not working for Melissa. Out of this, they generate goals and targets for what both Melissa can do, and really importantly, what Kathy can be doing, what else Kathy can be doing to provide excellent support to Melissa. This can then be used through a process called Working Together for Change. So you might be familiar with Working Together for Change as a process which takes information from person-centred reviews and aggregates what's working, what's not working, and what's important in the future that comes from person-centred reviews. I think we can also use this process with staff one-page profiles and looking at what's working and what's not working to replace staff satisfaction questionnaires. So what would it be like is if in an appraisal situation you looked at your one-page profile with your manager in a bit of the same way that Kathy and Melissa did and said, here are the top 2 things that are working for me, the top 2 things that aren't working for me so well, and the top 2 things that I'd like to see change in the future. What if the manager then worked with you to start to change some of the things that weren't working, but that data, that information went to a Working Together for Change day with the same information from all staff who will be sharing their top 2 working, not working, and important in the future. So the Working Together for Change process means that we then cluster and theme that, look at the clusters for what's working across the organisation, the cluster for what's not working across the organisation, and the clusters for what staff want to see changing in the future. And then we use a process called 5 Whys to really dig down deeper. If we look at what's not working for staff, what are the causes for that? What are the things that are causing that we can then treat the cause rather than just the symptom? And what would success look like from staff's perspective? And from that we can generate actions that feed into the business plan of the organisation. And I think that could be a much more powerful way to gather feedback from staff and really act on it than staff satisfaction questionnaires. And here's the 4th way. One-page profiles are fundamental to creating person-centred teams and essential to person-centred team plans as well. But that's a subject for a whole different webinar, which we'll do later on in the year. So before we finish, I would just like to give you 7 key mistakes that we're seeing in organisations who are interested in exploring one-page profiles for staff, and most importantly, how you can avoid them. So one of the things that we're noticing is that some people think you can't possibly do anything that's person-centered without having graphics in it, or if they all look the same, because people think that's the antithesis of what person-centered means. One senior management team that I was working with thought that doing templates for one-page profiles wasn't creative enough and wasn't person-centered enough. They wanted people to be able to choose what every one-page profile should look like. So I asked the senior management team to come back the next month and bring with them their one-page profile presented in the way that they wanted to. And that's what people did. And we had a vast, colourful and creative different one-page profiles that people shared with me. And then as we got talking a bit about it, people later confessed that actually they'd spent 80% of the time wondering how to make it look good and for it to look creative, and only 20% of the time on the content, the text in the one-page profile. And if you looked at the one-page profile, because people had been so creative and put clip art and photos on it, there was very little space for it to have the text in it, so you lost the detailed information that tells you who people were. So as a result of doing that, that particular senior management team decided that they wanted to create 5 different templates that had the maximum space for text, but still people could choose the template that they thought best represented them. And I think that's a good solution to that. So create templates where you can have the most space for writing and still have the photo, but a range of templates for staff to choose from. Here's the second mistake that we're seeing, the danger of people seeing this as the new fad, a new thing to do, to claim you're a person-centered organisation and just seeing it as a box to tick, that staff do their one-page profiles and then they just get filed away and lost in filing cabinets down like this. I think the solution is to be really clear about the purpose for doing one-page profiles for staff, why it fits with your strategy and how you're going to use them, so it just doesn't become an exercise and they get filed away. Here is the third problem and challenge that we're seeing. A good one-page profile, if you have a good one-page profile in front of you, and if you have the one-page profiles of your team, you should be able to take the photos off and the names off and still really know exactly who everybody is, because they're so detailed, you feel like you know the person just by reading it. A poor one-page profile reads like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The important to me might have things like have a home, have food, have a bed to sleep in at night, but they don't tell you anything that's particular and important to that individual as an individual. The solution to that is to have good training and support so people understand the level of detail that we need to make a good one-page profile, to make it vibrant and to mean something, and to do your top tips or your standards or guidance as an organisation so people know the detail that you expect. Here's another challenge. Where's the new form, where one-page profiles are just seen as the next form to complete? One-page profiles are not about a form at all. It's simply a way of recording different conversations that you have with people as you're learning about each other in different ways. And the solution is to make sure people really understand that, and it's not that it's presented, it's emailed to people, say, please put in here a list of what's important to you and how best to support you. You can guarantee that you're much more likely to get Maslow's hierarchy of needs rather than the rich detail that makes one-page profiles powerful. The next problem that's seeing is reinventing them. I'm hearing a lot of, oh, we've already got one of these, we just use different headings. Or people saying, oh, that's great, we could just add in another 6 or 8 headings and then they'll be even better. If you want to do that, that's fine, but the more headings you add in, the less space there is to capture rich information. And if you are determined to do that, don't call it a one-page profile. A one-page profile fundamentally has those 3 headings. Number 6 is about being mysterious. When we first started introducing one-page profiles to a particular team, they were very hesitant and reluctant, and we got very vague one-page profiles. Later on, when we talked to them about why that was, they confessed that they were very suspicious about why the organisation was introducing them, and they were a bit concerned about how the information might be used. And particularly in days where people are experiencing changes to their work conditions and their terms of employment, it's natural for people to wonder whether this is connected to that at all. The solution to this is to be really clear about the purpose, about why as an organisation you're doing them, and how people are going to be using them, so there's no room for mysteriousness or ambiguity, and people know exactly what's going to happen to them. Number 7, make them optional. What messages are you giving to staff if you say that one-page profiles are optional? You're saying that it's not an important part of your strategy, and it's more likely to give the impression that it's just a fad that you're now following. It also might say that you're not serious about wanting to learn about what matters to every staff member, but just a few who might be interested in doing this. So I think the solution to this is to be really clear about how one-page profiles fit in your strategy, and once you're doing that, it does mean all means all. You will want to do for every single staff member, whatever role they have in the organisation, as they have done in Bruce Lodge, where every staff member, whether it's catering staff, housekeeping, as well as support staff, and nursing staff and managers, all have one-page profiles themselves. So back to our first question, can you deliver personalisation without being person-centred with staff? I don't think so, but I'm really keen to know what you think. And I hope that I've shown in this webinar why I think one-page profiles are key. There's 3 reasons that I think organisations could consider in looking at one-page profiles across staff teams. The 4 different ways that you can use them, from introducing to performance to person-centred teams, and right through to matching and recruitment as well. And if you are interested in doing this, the 7 pitfalls that you can avoid through avoiding these 7 mistakes that we're seeing people make. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to have more information, here's my email, our website address, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I mentioned Kathy, the principal from Oxley Park, and Melissa. We've actually got a film where you can see that the way that she used one-page profiles in performance management. And if you go to our website called personalizingeducation.org, and at the top of that you'll see the YouTube icon. If you click on that, it takes you to a range of films around personalising education, and you'll see the one of Kathy and Melissa there as well. So Kerry, I'll hand over back to you and see what questions people have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Okay, I have a couple of questions to read out, but I would just like to say that for anybody who may have missed the beginning of today's webinar, if you would like to ask a question or put a question to Helen, please do type it into the questions box on your screen, and then I'll read it out for Helen and she'll be able to give you an answer. So the first question we have is, what happens if staff refuse and don't want to share personal information?
That's a really good question, because I think particularly if staff don't know why and how it's going to be used, naturally some people might be very reluctant to do that. When we were rolling these out in Bruce Lodge, which is the care home for people living with dementia, there was one staff member who was really reluctant to do that. And when we had that conversation in the leadership team, Lisa, the manager, said, I don't understand that, because what I see this person doing really naturally is having conversations with the people who live there, and also telling them about her kids and what she did in the evening and things like that. So for that particular person, it was just about saying, you're sharing this information naturally and brilliantly as part of your work. It's just simply sharing some of those things as well. In the hospital that I shared with you earlier, where they've introduced one-page profiles with staff, again, staff were reluctant and hesitant, or at least some of them were. We use a brilliant phrase that my colleague Michelle uses that says you can be as shallow as a teaspoon. So even if you just wanted to say, as in my case, I had 3 children, I've got 7 hens, and I'm mad about gardening, then those might be the really simple things that you choose to share. So one thing to do is to reassure people that they can share what Michelle will call quite shallow things at first, and then perhaps later may feel more confident in sharing other things as well. So it's going with people sharing the depth that they're interested in, but really encouraging people to share 2 or 3 things. And I think this is why it's really important that it's led by managers. And I think if you're starting to introduce this, you need to ask the managers to do it first, and the managers to boldly share personal information as well, because if they're not going to do it, you can't expect staff to do it.
Thank you. The next question is the graphic around what success means available for printing?
Absolutely. If you go onto our website, we've got a number of different, we call them one-page strategies. So we've got them for organisations supporting people with learning disabilities. We've got them for organisations supporting older people, and quite a range. We've even started to get them for schools as well. So I'll ask, Kerry, I'll ask you to specifically email them to the people who are logged on today, but also to let you know that if you're listening to the recording of this, you can find those on our website.
Thank you. And the final question I have is, should they just be about work if they are staff profiles?
This was a really big learning curve for me last year. So the first organisation that I worked with that rolled them out, we started, as I said, doing this with a leadership team. And the leadership team naturally were doing this for work and therefore just shared information about work. And actually in our team as well, in HSA, the first one-page profiles that we had on the website, we just shared work information about ourselves. But as we started to roll these out with staff, and as we started to see the potential for using it for matching, I realised that if we were expecting support staff to share their hobbies and interests, we were setting up almost a two-tier system where we were saying actually it's okay for managers to only share information about their work life, but we're expecting something different for staff, and that just didn't feel right. So in HSA, we then all changed our one-page profiles to share our hobbies and interests, as well as what's important to us at work and how well to support us at work. And that's what I'd really encourage organisations to do. So I think the ideal is to share the whole of yourself, as much as you feel able to, but not just focusing on work, but sharing what matters to you outside of work as well. And you can see the impact that this has. So the meetings that I facilitate regularly, we'll start with an opening round where we ask people to share one thing that's going well for them at work and one thing that's working well for them at home. And as people start to do that, the different conversations that happen over lunch and over coffee, and also people making really different connections with each other as well, it accelerates that rapport and getting to know each other differently. So if people are able to share their whole person, I think that's the most powerful way to do that.
Thank you, Helen. That's all of today's questions.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much for joining me on this webinar, and I look forward to staying in contact with you via Facebook, our group sites, or Twitter. Thank you very much.